Not every battle is fought on a distant battlefield. Sometimes the greatest tests of strength happen right here at home. When authority meets unshakable courage, who will the town rally behind? Let us know in the comments section below, and be sure to stay until the end for a twist you won't forget. Not every battle is fought on a distant battlefield. Sometimes the greatest tests of strength happen right here at home. When authority meets unshakable courage, who will the town rally behind? Let us know in the comments section below, and be sure to stay until the end for a twist you won't forget. Emily Fraser adjusted the cuff of her blazer as she stepped out of her truck, her boots hitting the cracked asphalt with a familiar, grounded thud. She scanned the wide-open street before her, taking in the worn-out brick buildings that lined Main Street like tired soldiers. Each structure carried its own scar: boarded windows, faded signs, roofs that sagged like they had long ago given up fighting. Her heart twinged, not with sadness, but with the slow-burn determination that had carried her through the worst corners of the world. Today wasn't just about business. Today was about honor, about fixing what had been left to rot when others stopped caring. She tucked a stray lock of chestnut hair behind her ear and slung her leather portfolio under one arm. This town had been her father's dream once. He'd built his auto shop here after getting out of the Marines, raised Emily and her brother Ryan in a house just 3 blocks from the very corner where she now stood, squinting at the peeling facade of the old police precinct. It was bigger than she remembered, more defiant, more stubborn, like it somehow knew she was here to tear its past down and build something new in its place. Across the street, the precinct doors swung open with a loud creak, and a heavy-set man in a navy uniform emerged, coffee in hand, mirrored sunglasses flashing in the mid-morning sun. Chief Daniel Marshall. Broad-shouldered, built like a linebacker gone soft at the edges, his badge gleamed in the light, just like the chip on his shoulder. He spotted Emily immediately. Paused. Emily felt the weight of his gaze, but didn't flinch. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, planting herself in his line of sight as if to say, "I'm not going anywhere." The chief lowered his cup, his mouth curling into something that was supposed to be a smile but felt more like a warning. "Well, if it isn't the hometown hero come back to save us," he called, voice dripping with a kind of amusement that dared her to take offense. Emily's lips twitched at the corners, but she kept her tone even, professional. "Good morning, Chief. I see not much has changed." A short, sharp bark of laughter escaped him. "Long, focused town like this, change don't happen without permission." She let the silence stretch, steady and unhurried. Then, with a half-smile, she tilted her head toward the precinct building. "I hear this old place might be on the market soon." Chief Marshall took a step down from the stoop, the wooden stairs groaning under his boots. He sauntered across the street without looking, cars instinctively slowing to let him pass, like even traffic knew better than to challenge him. When he reached her, he stood just a little too close enough to make a lesser person step back. Emily Fraser didn't move an inch. "You're wasting your time," he said, voice low and firm. "This building's not for you. Won't ever be for you." Emily's expression didn't change, but inside her mind was already ticking forward, cataloging the hostility, the intimidation tactics, the same ones she'd faced overseas in 1,000 different forms, from 1,000 different uniforms. And every single time, she'd won. "I appreciate your concern," she said coolly, pulling a thick, folded piece of paper from her portfolio. It was the signed intent to purchase contract, the one she'd spent the last 6 months negotiating with the town council. She didn't unfold it, didn't wave it around like a trophy. She just let it peek out, subtle and undeniable, like a storm cloud on the horizon. The chief's jaw ticked. "This isn't the big city, Miss Fraser. Folks round here like things the way they are. They like knowing who's in charge." Emily's gaze didn't waver. "Then they'll be glad to know it's someone who actually gives a damn." For a second, just a second, something flickered across his face, something raw and bitter and old. but just as quickly it vanished, replaced by the hardened mask of a man used to running unopposed. Without another word, he drained the rest of his coffee and dropped the empty cup in a trash can by the sidewalk. Then he turned and stomped back toward the precinct, every step loud and deliberate, like he could leave his displeasure tattooed into the ground behind him. Emily watched him go, the afternoon sun warming her face, the paper still tucked under her arm. She wasn't here to ask permission. She was here to rewrite the story, and like every mission she'd ever completed, she wasn't going to leave until it was done. Across town, news was already traveling faster than wildfire. "The Fraser girl's back," they whispered. "Buying property, making plans, shaking things up." In the window of the diner across the street, a few heads turned to watch her. A couple of people nodded, cautious, curious. One old man even tipped his cap in her direction before disappearing into the shadows of the booths. Emily took another deep breath and squared her shoulders. The past could sit in its dusty armchair and stew if it wanted. She had work to do. And if the chief thought intimidation would slow her down, he didn't know Emily Fraser at all. The following morning, Emily Fraser stood in the center of what would soon be hers. She tipped her head back, surveying the cracked ceilings, the long-forgotten file cabinets, the yellowed walls stained with decades of cigarette smoke and old secrets. Dust motes floated like lazy memories in the beams of early sunlight filtering through the broken blinds. The precinct's bones were strong. You couldn't fake that. Solid brick walls, reinforced doors, cells with heavy iron bars still intact. Emily smiled to herself, already imagining what it would become. A community center, a place for veterans, for kids, for anyone who'd been left to fend for themselves after the town stopped believing in second chances. Her boots echoed as she paced slowly down the corridor, the same halls where uniforms once swaggered, where deals were made behind locked doors, where fear had been used as currency. Not anymore. From the far end of the hallway came the scuff of footsteps. Emily turned just in time to see a shadow step through the doorway. Not Chief Marshal this time, but a younger man in plain clothes. He wore an old Sheriff's Department jacket, faded and 2 sizes too big, the name patch torn off. His hands were tucked casually into his pockets, but his eyes were sharp and restless. "You're the one buying this place?" he asked, his voice carrying just enough challenge to make it clear it wasn't an innocent question. Emily rested a hand on her hip, meeting his gaze head-on. "I am." "And you are?" The man smirked, slow and deliberate. "Name's Tyler Briggs, used to work here. Guess you could say I'm attached to the building?" Emily caught the faintest whiff of stale anger under his easy grin. Resentment simmered off him like heat from pavement. "Well, Mr. Briggs," she said calmly, "looks like you'll have to find something else to be attached to." He stepped closer. Close enough she could see the faint scar tracing his jawline. "Just saying," he drawled. "It'd be a real shame if someone came in here not knowing how things work in this town. Could step on the wrong toes. Make life harder than it needs to be." For a long moment, the two of them just stood there, breathing the same dusty air, the history of the building pressing down around them like a heavy, unseen hand. Emily's heart beat steady in her chest, unfazed. She'd faced down insurgents, warlords, bureaucrats who thought they owned the world. Tyler Briggs was just another man who mistook a warning for a threat. She smiled, slow and sure. "They appreciate the advice. Now, unless you're here to help clean up, you know where the door is." Tyler let the silence hang between them, chewing on it like old tobacco. Finally, he gave a short, humorless chuckle and turned on his heel, spitting on the ground near the doorframe before swaggering out into the sunlight. Emily waited until the door slammed shut behind him before letting her smile fade. She wasn't naive. The chief wasn't going to play fair. Men like Marshall didn't lose power quietly. They roared, they clawed, they tried to break the ground beneath your feet. But they forgot something vital. Emily Fraser had spent her life building new roads where no one thought it could be done. Later that afternoon, Emily sat at the counter of Rosie's diner, nursing a black coffee and scribbling notes into a battered notebook. Renovation estimates, timeline for inspections, contacts for local contractors. Her mind ticked forward with the brutal efficiency the Army had hammered into her. Objectives, resources, obstacles, solutions. She barely noticed when a figure slid onto the stool beside her. It wasn't until the smell of cheap cologne and false authority hit her nose that she glanced sideways and found Chief Marshal settling in. A self-satisfied smirk plastered across his face. "You don't waste time, do you?" he said, waving down Rosie behind the counter for a coffee. Emily tapped the end of her pen on the page. Calm. "I believe in making progress, Chief. You should try it sometime." He gave a low chuckle, shaking his head. "Progress." He said the word like it tasted wrong in his mouth. "Funny thing, people around here don't take kindly to outsiders tearing up tradition." Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. "I grew up here. This town made me. Just because I've been places you never had the guts to go doesn't make me an outsider." For a moment, the chief's smile flickered, cracked, but it was back just as quickly, plastered on harder than before. He leaned in, voice low. "You may have fooled the council with your shiny Army record and your big promises, but around here, respect's earned, not bought. You step on the wrong toes, you'll find out how little those papers you're so proud of actually mean." Rosie appeared with the chief's coffee, setting it down a little too hard, spilling a few drops. She shot Emily a quick glance, one that wasn't pity exactly, but something close to it. The old Emily, the one fresh out of boot camp, might have snapped back with something sharp, something cutting. But now? Now she understood the power of silence. She closed her notebook, tucked it under her arm, and rose from the stool. Without looking back, she said, "Respect isn't something I need from you, Chief. I earned it the hard way a long time ago." And she walked out of the diner, the tiny silver bell above the door, jingling like a shot fired into the air. As Emily crossed the street back toward her truck, she could feel the chief's eyes boring into her back. She welcomed the weight of it. She would not bend. "Jeff," and she knew, deep in her gut, that today had drawn the first real line. There would be no compromise, no handshake deals behind closed doors. This was war, and she had chosen her battlefield well. Inside her truck, she flipped open her notebook again and scrawled a fresh heading across the top of a blank page. Otherwise, the town wasn't dead yet. She'd seen it in Rosie's glance, in the way the old man had tipped his cap the day before. Quiet support. People waiting for someone brave enough to stand up first. It would come. They just needed to see someone refuse to back down. As she drove down Main Street, the buildings blurring past, she didn't see a dying town anymore. She saw opportunity. She saw a future where kids wouldn't have to leave just to survive, where families could sit safely on their porches without fear of whose rules they were breaking, where veterans could come home and still matter. And if Dan Marshall thought a few dirty tricks and veiled threats could scare her off, he was about to learn exactly what a lifetime of service had taught Emily Fraser. You never let the enemy choose the terms of your surrender. Because you never surrender, Marty. Not ever. The first shot wasn't loud. It didn't come with sirens or a flash of violence. It came quietly, through a notice pinned to the door of the precinct building that Emily Fraser found one cold Monday morning. Notice of code signature. Unsafe structure. Emily stood there a long moment, the edges of the paper fluttering in the breeze like a flag of surrender someone else expected her to raise. Her fingers tightened around the paper, crumpling the corner slightly before she folded it with precise care and tucked it under her arm. She knew exactly where this had come from. Inside the building, the air felt colder than usual. She kicked a stray soda can aside as she crossed the cracked floor, her boots raising small puffs of dust. Every noise echoed too loud against the bare walls. In her mind, she was already lining up the steps. Engineer inspection, formal appeal, legal notices if needed. They wanted to slow her down. They wanted to drown her in red tape. They were about to find out. She could swim just fine. By noon, she was sitting across from a man named Doug Patterson, a structural engineer with a clipboard permanently glued to his hand and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He frowned thoughtfully as he tapped a cracked support beam. "Bullet," he muttered, jotting something down. "Seen worse. This place is old, sure. But condemning it? That's political, not structural." Emily allowed herself a tight smile. "Good to know. Can you put that in writing?" Doug snorted. "Lady, for what you're paying me, I'll carve it in stone." Outside, the town moved at its usual slow pace, pickup trucks rattling down Main Street, the diner's bell jingling every so often, kids biking lazily down sidewalks too cracked to care. But underneath the calm, Emily could feel it. The town was holding its breath, watching. In the parking lot, Tyler Briggs leaned against his truck, arms folded, chewing a toothpick. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched as Emily walked Doug to his car, muttering something under his breath she couldn't hear. The enemy didn't always announce themselves with flags and uniforms. Sometimes they just stood there, quiet and smug, waiting for you to lose your nerve. Emily Fraser had no intention of losing anything. That evening, Emily gathered her second meeting at Rosie's diner. She'd slipped word quietly through town the day before. A few phone calls, a few whispered invitations. Veterans mostly, some old, some young, a handful of former factory workers, a retired schoolteacher with a stubborn glint in her eye. But 15 people in all, scattered around the back booths, sipping coffee and pretending they were there by coincidence. Rosie herself bustled behind the counter, pretending not to listen while cleaning the same spot on the formica over and over again. Emily stood at the front, hands clasped loosely in front of her. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't have to. "Some of you know me," she began. "Some of you knew my dad. He built something here once, and then we all watched it crumble." A few heads nodded. A few others shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not here to bring back the past. That's gone. I'm here to build something new. But I can't do it alone. I'm not naive. I know who's pulling the strings in this town." That got a few grim chuckles, a few muttered curses. "But they don't own it. Not unless we let them." She let that sit there for a moment, heavy and sharp. "They're opening this place to everyone. Veterans who need jobs, kids who need a place after school, families who don't feel safe anymore because the badge meant to protect them only protects itself. If you're here, it means you believe the same thing." A wiry old man at the back, Hank Matheson, who had served 2 tours in Vietnam, raised a hand. "What do you need from us, Emily?" Emily smiled, a real smile this time. "I need you to stand with me when they try to shut us down, and they will. I need witnesses. I need voices. I need bodies ready to show up and show this town who it really belongs to." Hank gave a slow nod, his gnarled hands closing into fists. One by one they began to speak. Offers of help, questions, ideas. Fear, too, but fear that was outweighed by something deeper. It was after 9 when Emily finally climbed into her truck and sat there a moment, the keys resting in her lap. Her body ached with the kind of exhaustion she hadn't felt since her deployments. The ache that came from knowing the real battle hadn't even started yet. He started the engine and pulled onto the empty street, the town lights blurring in the rearview mirror. As she passed the precinct, she saw the faint glow of a flashlight moving behind the boarded-up windows. She slowed down, just enough to get a glimpse of the silhouette inside. Too small for Chief Marshal. Probably Briggs. Maybe someone else, watching, waiting. Emily didn't speed up. She didn't look away. She wanted them to see her. Wanted them to know she wasn't sneaking around like a thief in her own home. The munch, the next morning, brought the second shot. The local paper, the Wilkesburg's Gazette, ran a front-page story about concerning activities at the old precinct. It quoted anonymous sources. It talked about outsiders. It talked about unlicensed gatherings. It painted Emily Fraser as a problem before she even had a chance to explain what she was building. She stood outside the drugstore reading the paper, the headlines practically screaming at her from the newsstand. Behind her, two women whispered near the crosswalk, casting glances her way. At the gas station, the cashier barely made eye contact. At the diner, Rosie slid her coffee over with a grimace and muttered, "Remember, they're setting the stage, Emily. Watch your step." Emily sipped the coffee, letting the bitterness settle deep inside her bones. She wasn't angry at the town. Not yet. Fear made people do stupid things. Fear made people cling to the devils they knew rather than risk something new. She understood that. But understanding didn't mean forgiveness. Later that afternoon, a patrol car cruised slowly past the precinct, pausing just long enough for the officer inside to take a picture. Emily stood on the steps, arms folded, watching them with a raised eyebrow. No words needed. When the cruiser pulled away, she exhaled slowly, the air curling in front of her like smoke. They weren't hiding anymore. Neither was she. Inside, she pinned a fresh sheet of paper to the cracked bulletin board that had once held wanted posters and department memos. In thick black letters, she wrote, "Grand opening, Community Center for All, coming soon." She stood back and stared at it for a long time, the ink still drying, the future still unwritten. They could throw every stone they wanted, every rule, every lie, every dirty trick. Emily Fraser wasn't here to survive. She was here to win. It started with a parking ticket. Emmeline found it, tucked under the windshield wiper of her truck when she came out of the hardware store, arms full of paint samples and blueprints, a bright orange slip fluttering in the wind, bold as a slap across the face. Parking violation, unauthorized zone, fine, $250, 0 cents. She stared at it for a long moment, lips pressed tight. She had parked there a dozen times before. Half the town did. No signs, no warnings. Across the street, a patrol cruiser idled by the curb, the officer inside sipping from a giant styrofoam cup, eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses, watching. Emily tucked the ticket into her jacket pocket without a word. It wasn't about the money, it was about sending a message. Now, the way I look at it, the ticket sitting on the passenger seat like a building, smelling a passenger seat like an accusation. The building smelled of old varnish and dust, the walls lined with faded photographs of mayors and councilmen who all wore the same tight-lipped smile. Behind the front desk, a young clerk looked up with wide, anxious eyes when Emily approached. "I'm here to appeal a ticket," Emily said, voice cool and professional. The girl flushed, glancing nervously toward the back office. "You'll have to, talk to Mrs. Henderson. Room 3? Emily nodded, boots clicking sharply against the scuffed tile floor as she made her way down the narrow hallway. She found Mrs. Henderson, a stout woman with sharp eyes and a sharper voice, hunched over a typewriter the town clearly hadn't upgraded since the ADS. Without glancing up, the woman barked, "Leave it in the basket. Appeals are processed third Thursday of every month." Emily laid the ticket gently on the desk instead. "I'll wait." Mrs. Henderson's fingers froze over the keys. Slowly she lifted her gaze, sighed heavily. Then, as if reciting from memory, she said, "Appeals can be rejected at the discretion of the chief of police." Emily smiled, all teeth. "I'm aware." Miss Henderson stared a moment longer, then scooped up the ticket and slammed a rubber stamp down onto it. "Denied," in big red letters. Emily thanked her politely, turned, and walked out. Every step down that hallway felt heavier, not because she was losing, no, because she could feel them closing ranks, building walls around her, brick by brick, trying to bury her under paperwork and petty rules, until she either gave up or snapped. Neither was going to happen. Back at the precinct, she tossed the crumpled ticket onto the floor beside the growing pile of trash bags and broken furniture she hadn't had time to haul away yet. Then she grabbed her phone, dialed a number she hadn't used in years. It rang once, twice, a third time. Then a gruff voice answered. "Hey, Sarge," she said, a smile creeping into her voice. "Still got that muscle you keep bragging about?" There was a pause, then a chuckle, low and familiar. "Depends. You buying beer?" "Beer, barbecue, and bragging rights," Emily said. "I'm putting together a crew. Could use a few good men. You need us to paint walls or start a war?" Emily grinned, feeling the old fire light in her chest. "Get a little of both." Saturday morning, the cavalry arrived. 6 trucks pulled into the cracked parking lot, engines growling, tires kicking up dust, veterans from all over. Some Emily had served with, others she'd met through old connections, Army, Navy, Marines, men and women who moved like they still heard cadence calls in their bones. They climbed out, laughing and shouting, hauling toolboxes and ladders like weapons. At the front of the pack was Sarge, real name Henry Coleman, built like a bulldozer, his beard now streaked with gray, but his grin just as sharp as ever. Emily met them at the front steps, arms crossed, heart swelling in her chest. "I hope you boys and girls didn't come here expecting a parade," she said. Sarge clapped her on the back hard enough to make her stagger. "Hell no, we came for the fight." And they got to work. The precinct came alive under their hands. Walls scrubbed clean, windows boarded and replaced. The old front desk, once a symbol of power and intimidation, was hauled out and smashed into pieces in the dumpster. They painted the walls a warm, inviting blue, built shelves where the old gun lockers had been, set up classrooms in the back rooms, hammering in chalkboards and cheap tables. By noon, music was blasting from a set of battered speakers, country, rock, a little Motown. Someone started a grill out back. Rosie showed up with trays of sandwiches and thermoses of sweet tea. Kids wandered over from the playground down the block, wide-eyed and curious. And for the first time in a long time, the precinct wasn't a place of fear. It was a place of hope. But not everyone was happy. Chief Marshal showed up around 2, striding across the lot like he still owned it. His uniform was crisp. His mouth was a hard, thin line. He stopped dead at the sight of Sarge standing on a ladder, painting over the old precinct emblem with the words "Welcome Center" in big, looping letters. Marshall's jaw twitched. He turned on Emily, voice low and dangerous. "You don't have a permit for this kind of construction?" Emily pulled a laminated paper from her back pocket and handed it to him without a word. "Special temporary use permit. Signed by the acting mayor. Thank you, old contacts. Thank you, small-town politics." Marshall read it, face darkening by the second. "You're pushing your luck," he hissed. Emily shrugged. "Luck's got nothing to do with it. You picked this fight. I'm just finishing it." Around them, the veterans kept working, unbothered, hammers ringing, ladders clattering, laughter echoing across the lot. Marshall glared at her a moment longer, then threw the paper at her feet and stomped back to his cruiser. Mella bent, picked it up, dusted it off, and smiled. She didn't need the chief's permission. She didn't need his blessing. All she needed was a crack in his armor, and he had just given her 1,000. That night, the town saw something it hadn't seen in years. Light pouring from the windows of the old precinct. Music spilling out into the street. Families gathering. Laughter rising. Emily stood on the front steps, arms folded, watching the little pieces of hope stitch themselves back together. They weren't just fixing a building, they were fixing a town. And no amount of tickets, threats, or dirty tricks was going to stop it. Chief Marshal could see the writing on the wall. Problem was, he was too angry, too proud, to read it. But he would. Joan, the first warning came in the form of shattered glass. Emily heard the crash before she saw it. She sprinted around the side of the precinct, heart hammering against her ribs, just in time to see the broken window in the community room, jagged teeth of glass still clinging to the frame. Inside, a brick lay among the wreckage, a crude message scrawled in spray paint across the stone. "Get out." The night air smelled of smoke and something heavier, something sour, fear. But Emily didn't let it touch her. She knelt by the brick, fingers brushing the sharp edges, reading the message again and again, until the letters lost their meaning, and all that remained was the intent behind it. They wanted her scared, they wanted her to quit. She rose slowly, turning toward the darkness beyond the parking lot. Somewhere out there, the cowards who threw the brick were watching, waiting. She stared into the shadows and made a silent promise. "You'll break before I do." By dawn, word of the attack had spread. The parking lot buzzed with quiet anger as volunteers trickled in, more than usual. Faces she hadn't seen before, fathers with their kids, grandmothers carrying trays of food, veterans who hadn't worn their service caps in years now pulled them low over determined eyes. It wasn't just Emily's fight anymore. It was theirs, too. Across the street, the police cruisers lined up like sentries. Chief Marshal stood by his car, arms crossed, face carved from stone. Tyler Briggs lounged nearby, smirking as he flicked a cigarette butt into the gutter. Ella didn't flinch. She gathered her people on the front steps, raising her voice over the buzz of conversation. "They want to scare us," she said. "They want us to back down. If we walk away, they win. But if we stand together..." They realized something a lot scarier than a brick through a window. Hank Matheson, standing in the front row with his Vietnam vet cap pulled low, nodded grimly. "They realize we're not afraid anymore." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Emily met their eyes, one by one, steady and sure. "They can break our windows, they can smear our names. But they can't take this back, unless we let them." Behind her, someone taped cardboard over the broken window. Temporary, but strong enough for now. The hours crawled by in a tense, brittle rhythm. Emily worked alongside the volunteers, painting trim, hauling furniture, organizing donated supplies. Every time she glanced across the street, the cruisers were still there, watching, waiting. By mid-afternoon, the pressure finally snapped. 2 officers approached. Not Marshall, not Briggs, but younger ones, their faces tight with nerves. "Miss Fraser?" The taller one said stiffly. "You're in violation of Town Ordinance 14B, unauthorized public gathering without permit." Emily wiped her hands on her jeans, stepping forward. "Hello. I have a permit." He shook his head quickly, pulling a new slip of paper from his clipboard. "Revoked, as of this morning." Emily took the paper, scanning the hastily stamped red letters. "Revoked, on the grounds of safety concerns." Behind her, the crowd stirred, anger rising like heat from asphalt. "You're going to shut us down because someone attacked us?" she asked, voice low and dangerous. The officer shifted uneasily. "I'm just doing my job." Emily folded the paper neatly, tucking it into her back pocket. "No, you're being used." Behind her, a voice called out, "Rosie," from the diner, apron still dusted with flour. "We ain't leaving." Another voice, "Hank," rough and full of fire. "This is our town, too." The officers hesitated, glancing back toward the cruisers. Toward Marshall, who stood rigid by his car, face pale with fury. Emily saw the moment it happened, the shift, the break. The officers stepped back, mumbling something about needing to call it in. They retreated to their cars, radios crackling nervously. Across the street, Marshall barked something into his radio, furious, his face going red. Emily climbed the steps of the precinct, turning to face the gathering crowd. "Anyone who wants to leave, leave now," she said, voice carrying strong and clear. "But I'm not going anywhere, and if they want this building, they'll have to come take it from me." No one moved. "Not mine?" The tension snapped like a live wire. Marshall's cruiser peeled out, tires screeching, and moments later more sirens howled down the street. 3 more cruisers roared into the lot, lights flashing. Officers poured out, some nervous, some grim, some looking everywhere but directly at the people on the steps. Emily stood at the top, arms folded, unmoving. Starge appeared at her side, hands on his hips, grinning like he was back in Baghdad, facing down insurgents. "What's the plan, Captain?" he asked, voice light, but eyes deadly serious. Emily's mind raced through possibilities, strategies, consequences. "Hold the line," she said. "Make them show the town who they really are." The officers spread out, forming a loose semicircle around the steps. Barked orders, threats of arrest, demands to disperse. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. A wall of living defiance. Marshall shoved his way through the officers, face twisted in rage. "This is your last warning, Fraser," he snarled. "You're under arrest for unlawful assembly, resisting a lawful order." Emily smiled grimly. Funny thing about lawful orders, they have to actually be lawful. Behind her, Hank stepped forward, planting his cane firmly on the ground. "If you're taking her," he rasped, "you're taking all of us." Rosie moved beside him, then Sarge, then the kids, their parents, the old men, the teenagers, one by one, shoulder to shoulder, facing the chief's rage. Marshall's eyes flickered, panic barely concealed. The cameras came next. Phones lifted, local news vans rolling into the lot, microphones thrust over shoulders, shouts, questions. The whole town, it seemed, turning its gaze toward the man who had ruled by fear for too long. And suddenly, Chief Daniel Marshall wasn't just a bully anymore. He was a spectacle. He turned on Emily, veins bulging at his temple. "This isn't over." "No," Emily said, calm and certain. "It's just beginning." Marshall snarled something unintelligible, then barked at his officers to fall back. One by one they retreated to their cruisers, faces blank, pretending they hadn't just been beaten without a single punch thrown. The sirens faded into the distance. The crowd stayed rooted in place for a long, breathless moment. Then, slowly, the tension cracked open into cheers, laughter, clapping, shouts of victory. Emily didn't bask in it. She didn't throw her arms in the air or claim credit. She just stood there, steady, watching the town remember its own strength. Sarge bumped her shoulder. "Damn proud of you, Captain." Rosie beamed, wiping her eyes. Hank saluted, hand trembling. Emily let herself smile then. Small, fierce. They had won the battle. The war wasn't over yet. But for the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like something to fear. It looked like something they could build together. The grand opening came sooner than anyone expected. A week after the showdown, the precinct doors swung open wide under a hand-painted banner that stretched across the entryway, "Wilkesburg Community Center, a place for all." Emily stood in the front lobby, still adjusting the last folding chairs, when she heard the low hum of voices outside. She straightened, smoothing the front of her navy pool shirt, and stepped onto the cracked steps that once held nothing but fear and division. The block was full. Cars lined both sides of Main Street, families with strollers, veterans in their best dress jackets, high schoolers snapping photos. Rosie had set up a table stacked high with cookies and coffee. Hank leaned on his cane beside her, handing out little American flag pins to the kids with a quiet pride that made Emily's throat tighten. At the center of it all stood Sarge, laughing as he directed traffic like it was a parade instead of a grand opening. For the first time in a long time, the town didn't look divided. It looked whole. Emily swallowed the lump rising in her chest and stepped up to the makeshift podium at the top of the steps. Someone handed her a microphone, the wire trailing back through an open window, plugged into a battered old speaker salvaged from a yard sale. She tapped it once, and the crowd fell into an expectant hush. "Good afternoon, Wilkesburg," she said, her voice carrying strong and clear across the lot. A ripple of applause broke out, fast and warm. Emily smiled, shielding her eyes from the sun with one hand as she looked over the faces in the crowd. Faces that had once watched her with suspicion, now filled with cautious hope. "I could stand up here and tell you about permits, about inspections, about all the hurdles it took to get this place open," she said. But that's not what matters. He paused, letting the quiet settle in. What matters is what we choose to build here. What matters is who we decide to be, not the fear we inherit, but the future we create. Together. Another ripple of applause, louder this time. This building was once a place where people felt powerless. Today, it's a place where everyone belongs. Veterans, families, kids, seniors, every single person who calls Wilkesburg home. She saw Rosie wiping her eyes, Hank standing a little straighter, Sarge giving her a sharp nod of approval. We aren't here because we waited for someone to save us. We're here because we stood up for each other. We stood up for what's right, and no one can take that away from us. The cheers erupted full force, a roar that filled the afternoon air with energy and promise. Behind her, the new sign above the door gleamed in the sun. Bold, undeniable. The ribbon cutting was next. Two little kids, a brother and sister, stood beside Emily, holding the oversized scissors between them, grinning from ear to ear. She guided their hands to the ribbon, counting down with the crowd. 3, 2, 1. The ribbon snapped cleanly, and the doors officially opened. People flooded in, laughing, marveling at the transformation. The once dingy halls were now painted in bright colors, the rooms filled with donated books, games, and supplies. One room had been turned into a computer lab, another into a small counseling center. The cells in the back, once places of fear, were now storage closets filled with sporting equipment and art supplies. And it wasn't perfect, it wasn't finished, but it was real. Emily moved through the crowd, shaking hands, hugging old friends, making new ones. Everywhere she turned, someone thanked her, someone offered to help, someone asked how they could sign up to volunteer. In the corner of the main room, Sarge had already commandeered a group of teenagers to help set up a free self-defense class. Rosie had organized a bake sale to fund future repairs. Hank was talking to a young man about starting a mentoring program for kids whose parents were struggling. The pieces were falling into place. Fine. It wasn't just a building. It was a movement. Outside, leaning against a telephone pole, Chief Marshal watched it all unfold. He wore no uniform now, no badge. The fallout had come hard and fast after the confrontation at the precinct. Cell phone videos had gone viral. The local paper had printed every dirty trick he'd pulled in giant headlines. His resignation had been demanded and delivered. He looked smaller now, his shoulders hunched, a man who had mistaken fear for loyalty and found himself abandoned when the fear ran dry. Emily caught his eye across the parking lot. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat. She just nodded once, firm and final, and turned away. The past had no place here anymore. As the sun began to dip low, casting long golden shadows across the lot, a small band of veterans set up folding chairs and a battered old flagpole they had found buried in the junk at the back of the precinct. Together they raised a new flag, clean, bright, rippling proudly in the evening breeze. The crowd stood silent as it climbed higher. When it reached the top, Sarge led the group in a simple, powerful salute. Some placed their hands over their hearts, others stood quietly, heads bowed. No speeches, no pomp, if respect. Emily stood at the back, watching, her hand pressed lightly to her chest, feeling the steady beat of her heart beneath her palm. It felt right. It felt earned. As the last notes of the national anthem played from a small portable speaker, Rosie came up beside her, nudging her gently with an elbow. "Did you ever think you'd pull it off?" Rosie asked, voice low and teasing. Emily laughed softly, shaking her head. "Not a day went by I didn't wonder." Rosie smiled. Maybe. But you never let it show." Emily turned to watch the flag flutter against the deepening blue sky. "That's the job, isn't it?" she murmured. "You keep standing, even when everything else tries to knock you down." Rosie squeezed her arm. "Well, Captain Fraser, looks like you built something worth standing for." Emily let herself believe it then, fully and without reservation. Not just to build it, not just a victory, a future, as the town gathered around her, laughing, hugging, building new memories in the shell of what once had been broken. Emily Fraser knew this was only the beginning. The battles she had fought overseas had taught her how to survive. But this place, these people, had taught her something far more powerful, more to fly, how to thrive. The past didn't own her. Fear didn't define her. And in the heart of a town that had once forgotten how to hope, Emily Fraser had helped it remember. The lights inside the community center blazed bright against the twilight, a beacon for anyone who needed a place to stand, a place to belong. And for the first time in a long time, Wilkesburg wasn't just a town again. It was home,